President Trump is making history by literally showing up to the Supreme Court to hear the arguments against birthright citizenship, something that's obviously been very important to his political agenda, very important to our political agenda because of how substantial this is to how the left maintains their power over patriots. And so we'll be discussing the history of that, the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship, even going back to not only the framers' intent for the Constitution, citizenship, but even just like the concept of judicial review itself being something that's this very sort of silly invention, not exactly how the Supreme Court was supposed to function. And speaking of the function of government, Pam Bondi is out of the DOJ. Donald Trump just fired her. I think yesterday the announcement came out, so we will be discussing what's going on there, who could replace her, and whether we'll perhaps see something with a little bit more teeth when it comes to Antifa, Epstein, all that stuff. Plus, we've got the Q&A. Do stay tuned. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the John Doyle Show. We have so much to discuss today, and it is so important that we discuss it on the internet. We will be dealing with the issue of birthright citizenship. That is essentially this idea that we had where you can simply just like plop out on American soil and be a citizen. You can be equal in status, equal in American to people who were here at the time of the founding, even before that, actually. We're pretty much the only people to have ever decided this is a good idea ever. No other serious country presently, no other great civilization would recognize citizenship in this way. And so not only is it sort of a restoration of constitutional understanding to attack this, it is truly a restoration of just like reality to attack this, a restoration of national sovereignty, people just more or less taking themselves seriously. So this is extremely important. And because it's extremely important, it was one of the things that Trump went after first, over 1 year ago, January 2025. If you remember the early days of Trump 2.0, President Trump issues a sweeping executive order declaring actually that, yeah, children born in the United States geographically to illegal aliens are not actually automatically American citizens. And so, of course, the left freaks out. You shine sunlight on the vampire. They're getting hit. They're weak. CNN calls it unconstitutional. The New York Times says it's racist, it's xenophobic. Democrat leaders immediately are suing. It's obviously a whole thing. You know, activists are flooding the streets. They're screaming that Trump is destroying the American dream, which is, of course, for the entire world. I don't know why it's called the American dream. He's violating the 14th Amendment. He's a dictator, Hitler. All the usual stuff, right? The usual talking heads, usual talking points, everything. The Republic is dying, right? Here is the problem with that, though. Both the founding fathers and the actual authors of the 14th Amendment would have agreed with Donald Trump. The 14th Amendment was actually passed after the Civil War for literally one purpose, which was to grant citizenship to freed slaves who had been born in America, but who were denied citizenship under Dred Scott. This was never intended to create some system where illegal aliens could just like waltz right into the country and just plop out a child, and all of a sudden that's an American citizen who then it's an investment, because then that American citizen can go on to later sponsor the entire family for legal residency. That interpretation is an extremely modern invention, to put it diplomatically. That is not even approximating the original understanding. Even the landmark Supreme Court case, which we'll talk about, the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, Wong Kim Ark. This is a real name. This is a real thing that happened. This is often cited as like the definitive ruling on birthright citizenship. Even that ruling provides a far narrower path for this kind of stuff than like the activists will now claim. So the real constitutional problem runs a lot deeper. The whole concept itself of like judicial review, this idea that the Supreme Court justices, who themselves are really unelected actually, can strike down laws passed by elected representatives. That's not in the Constitution. The courts literally just like invented that in the 19th century for self-serving reasons. We will discuss that. The point is, in terms of spurging out in the media, flooding the streets as a response to this kind of like radicalism, Trump is not actually the radical here. It's that thing that happens in American politics where everything is going the way that it's always gone. And then for the last 60 years, the left ruins everything, and our attempts to restore things to how they previously were are perceived as radical, when in actuality, it is these people who are the disruptors and the radicals, and we are simply normal American patriots. Like, these are the people who turned a post-Civil War amendment, which again was meant literally just to protect freed slaves. They turned that into like this blank check for illegal immigration and frankly, birth tourism, right? Especially from adversaries like China, who, as a matter of policy, send pregnant women to give birth here in America and create future American spies with American passports. This is many such cases, right? And the left will call this unconstitutional. Famously, they are fans of constitutional scholarship. The founders would call it obvious. They perhaps even would call it self-evident, right? So the 14th Amendment was never meant for that creation of automatic citizenship for children of illegal aliens. This, again, was specifically a post-Civil War measure to secure citizenship for freed slaves who'd been born on American soil, denied it prior to the war. In 1868, that citizenship clause states, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Key phrase being, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They understood this to mean complete jurisdiction, owing full allegiance to the United States, not merely just being like physically present as a matter of chance on the soil. Freed slaves obviously met this standard. Illegal aliens obviously do not. Temporary visitors obviously do not. Their children obviously do not. Their children are not automatically citizens under the original understanding and intent of this amendment. Senator Jacob Howard, one of the amendment's principal authors, explained during the debate that this clause, quote, will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers accredited to the government of the United States. Okay, so he and other framers made it very clear that the amendment addressed this like unique situation of formerly enslaved people, not some like blanket right for anybody born on U.S. soil, regardless of their parents' status. Like they viewed citizenship as a solemn political, like civilizational bond, something far deeper than a piece of paper, obviously, which is maybe why they didn't think a piece of paper could ever be interpreted this way, but certainly not some kind of like geographic accident or scam, right? So the whole like modern anchor baby policy where illegal aliens cross the border specifically to give birth and secure U.S. citizenship for their child and for themselves by extension, that is a gross distortion of the 14th Amendment. That's not how we do things here. That was never intended to function as like this immigration loophole so we could be outsmarted by people with 78 IQs, like some kind of tool for demographic engineering, which is, of course, how the left has used it. No, this is, again, a narrow fix for the unique situation due to the freed slaves in the aftermath of the Civil War. Like, that is what that is. So Trump's challenge to birthright citizenship is therefore not radical. Therefore, it is simply a conservative return to the true understanding of the Constitution. David French, eat your heart out. Did you see that, by the way? This guy's such an idiot, dude. He literally tweeted out, like, populists always ask, what have conservatives ever conserved? Well, we're about to conserve birthright citizenship. This is a person who... We are going to have producer Blake eat this person, dude. I have like literally no tolerance for David French, sort of an old-aged general, not really exactly in the fight anymore, but one of those people who after you win, you kind of like go find an exile and hunt down just as a humiliation ritual for, the defeated foe. You take out their top guys. Not that I'm threatening David French. I don't mean that in a literal sense. I just mean that like this person should continue to be embarrassed until he receives the mercy of no longer being in the public eye. Anyway, you look at the case we mentioned earlier, again, with the Chinaman, right? The modern claim that the 14th Amendment grants automatic birthright citizenship to anyone on the U.S. soil, including the children of literally illegal aliens, that rests almost entirely on that one Supreme Court decision, which was Wong Kim Ark versus the United States. That was in 1898. And essentially, the activists are treating this case like it's gospel, right? This is the definitive ruling that forever settled the question. In reality, Wong Kim Ark was a clear example, in my opinion, perhaps even objectively, of this kind of like judicial activism that is stretching everything, including the 14th Amendment, far beyond its like original purpose. Like even on its own narrow terms, you look at the decision, it does not actually support universal birthright citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. The facts of the case illuminate this. Like you look at Wong Kim Ark, the guy born in San Francisco in 1873, the Chinese parents who were legal, permanent residents, they're in the U.S., they're not diplomats, they're not here temporarily, like they're carrying on business, they had established a permanent domicile, the parents themselves could not naturalize because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, but they still were like lawfully present. So when Wong traveled abroad and then tried to re-enter the United States, he was denied because he was not a citizen. So the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, holding that, well, he was a citizen because of the 14th Amendment. Okay, the actual language of the opinion, however, far narrower than that myth is kind of suggesting. You look at the actual opinion. Justice Horace Gray wrote, He says the amendment applies to a child born in the United States of parents who have permanent residence and a permanent domicile in the United States. They're there carrying on business. They are, say, not employed in any kind of diplomatic or official capacity. That is not a blanket rule for every baby born on American soil. That requires lawful, permanent residence, active participation in American life. Illegal aliens, by nature and definition, do not have a permanent domicile. They are not supposed to be here. They are not lawfully here. They are in present violation of the law as their first engagement with American society. Their first participation in American society is violating its laws. So that case, therefore, provides no constitutional basis for anchor babies. This is a limited ruling for a very specific class of legal residents. Not exactly the same thing. Even worse, the decision represented that same activism we're talking about, because the 14th Amendment was ratified to secure citizenship for the free slaves after the war. The court essentially rewrote that amendment to fit this broader vision of a kind of jus soli, right? Like the Roman law principle where you have citizenship simply by soil, rather than actually sticking to the original public meaning. This same court had previously denied citizenship to American Indians born on U.S. soil, showing that this was very inconsistently applied. Even after the 14th Amendment was ratified, it is not being applied across the board, which you would assume it would be if it were some objective ruling about something which we all knew to be true the entire time. Obviously this is wrong, and it's meant to suit particular judicial preferences for an activist class. So Wong Kim Ark was always a flawed expansion. This was never meant to authorize the current system of birth tourism, anchor babies, obviously things being exploited by the Democrat Party, being exploited by adversaries like China. Even the Supreme Court's own logic in the case reveals the limits of birthright citizenship, because if the 14th Amendment truly granted automatic citizenship to every person born on U.S. soil, then American Indians should have been citizens from the moment the amendment was ratified in 1868, right? They were not. American Indians born on U.S. soil were explicitly excluded from citizenship under the 14th Amendment for decades, actually. And the Supreme Court repeatedly held that Indians were not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States because they owed allegiance to their tribes. And that remained law until Congress actually passed the Indian Citizenship Act in 1924, which was more than a quarter century after the Wong Kim Ark decision. And that act collectively naturalized all Native Americans born in the United States who were not already citizens. And the common defense of this is Indians lived on reservations. That was a separate sovereign thing. Obviously, they couldn't have full allegiance. The problem with that, though, Indian reservations have never actually been recognized as independent nations by any foreign government. We're just sort of letting them do their little thing. It's cute. We like it. But that territory is still universally recognized as being part of the United States. Only the United States itself really treats them as domestic independent nations. But again, like we said, if the 14th Amendment truly created universal birthright citizenship based on physical location alone, then that should have been enough. Then Indians born on those reservations should have been citizens regardless of tribal status. And even if they have an allegiance to the tribe or whatever, okay, we're pretending these people coming into the country waving foreign flags don't have an allegiance to the foreign flags. Are you kidding me? So it's obviously just nonsense. But that proves itself that the amendment was never intended to operate as absolute rule of use solely, right? This historical anomaly exposes that selective, that activist nature of the entire modern birthright citizenship doctrine. That same court denied citizenship to Indians born on U.S. soil, and then later stretched the amendment to cover children of legal Chinese residents with the Wong case or whatever. But the court itself, as we've discussed earlier, we mentioned this a year ago in the wake of the tariff stuff, is already operating beyond its intended scope. The modern Supreme Court's ability to strike down laws passed by elected representatives, that rests on that one decision that we all learn about among two things we learn about. Marbury versus Madison, 1803. Why do we learn so much about that particular case? Of course, because that is the mechanism by which the left wins and we lose. It's all judicial activism, judicial review. That is the power to declare acts of Congress, maneuvers of the president unconstitutional. Problem is, that's not actually mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. You look at Article 3 of the Constitution that establishes the Supreme Court, that does not grant the court the authority to unilaterally overturn legislation. The framers actually deliberately left the exact scope of judicial power vague as a compromise specifically between those who wanted a strong national judiciary and those who preferred to leave most matters to state courts. And so the court simply took the power for itself. This was intended to be literally the Supreme Court, meaning the Supreme Court of the nation can rule between, disputes between states. This was not meant to be, some kind of body that could hold the other branches of Congress or the other branches of government accountable in the way that we're taught, of course, like every year that we do civics or whatever in U.S. schools. So the facts of the actual case sort of illuminate this, I think. If you look in the final days of his presidency, John Adams appointed dozens of federal judges and justices of the peace in a last-minute kind of effort to stock the judiciary with Federalists before Thomas Jefferson took office. So, some commissions were not delivered before Adams left. Jefferson's Secretary of State, James Madison, refused to deliver the remaining commissions because Jefferson believed the commissions were invalid. William Marbury, one of the appointees, sued Madison directly in the Supreme Court, asking it to issue a writ of mandamus forcing delivery of his commission. Chief Justice John Marshall, himself a Federalist and an Adams appointee, faced a little bit of a dilemma. Because if the court orders Madison to deliver the commission, Jefferson's probably going to ignore it. That's going to weaken the judiciary, right? But if the court sides with Jefferson, it would look weak. It would look partisan. So the solution was great. The solution was very self-serving. He simply ruled that Marbury was entitled to his commission, but that the section of the Judiciary Act of 1789 granting the Supreme Court original jurisdiction to issue writs of mandamus was unconstitutional. Therefore, the court had no power to hear the case. So literally in a stroke of a pen, Marshall asserted the power of judicial review while avoiding a kind of direct confrontation with the executive branch. This was not a neutral constitutional interpretation. It was not a textualist, originalist interpretation. This was actually just like a power grab. The Constitution nowhere authorizes the court to nullify laws passed by Congress. The founders expected the judiciary actually to be like the weakest branch. Hamilton argues this in Federalist 78. Instead, this case creates this doctrine that allows 9 unelected justices to veto the will of the people, the will that they have elected through literally elected representatives, a chief executive. Like, this is the root of modern judicial activism. That is why you look at all of the biggest victories of the left in the last 100 years. Notice they always come from the courts. Every single one. All these dramatic social changes come not from the people, but from the courts specifically. You also notice that when the right tries to do something that is represented by the will of the people, we win all 7 swing states. We win the popular vote. This is democratic. Curiously, then, that same body tells us, nope, actually, it's unconstitutional. So it's sort of a one-way street, isn't it? It's sort of a ratchet kind of mechanism. And of course, the same pattern repeats today, where you see courts have repeatedly blocked Trump's executive actions on tariffs, immigration, everything else he's trying to do by using this invented power. Just as Marshall used Marbury to check Jefferson, activist judges are using it today to check Trump. Like the whole birthright citizenship debate in itself, that is simply the latest example. A proper reading of the 14th Amendment, a proper reading of the Naturalization Act of 1790 shows the founders never, of course, actually intended for automatic citizenship for children of illegal aliens. Yet, because of this power, courts have now used judicial review to simply impose an incorrect opposite interpretation upon the people of the United States for decades. So until that overreach is confronted, all of these elected branches are ultimately going to remain subordinate to an unelected judiciary, and that's a problem. And we're facing it right now. This idea that like 9 unelected lawyers in Washington should have the final say over laws passed by elected representatives, that would have actually struck the founding fathers as like deeply dangerous, perhaps even insane. Remember, these are guys who had lived under British rule, where the king, other unelected officials, would actually hold this kind of like unchallenged power. And the colonists knew firsthand how these officials could impose their will on the people without accountability. And in many of the original colonies themselves, the legislature actually served as the sort of like highest court of appeals. Like the Massachusetts General Court, for example, served as both the lawmaking body and the final judicial authority in the colony. This arrangement was good because it ensured that judges were accountable to the people through their elected representatives rather than the sort of autonomous body that we're all like stuck with. So the judiciary was not a separate superior branch like floating above the political process. This was integrated into the representative system. And that reflected a deep suspicion of concentrated, unaccountable power, which is, of course, a lesson learned from centuries of European monarchy, aristocracy. Like, this is, of course, the founding political thought of America, right? So when the Constitution was drafted in 1787, the framers deliberately left the exact scope of the Supreme Court's power to be pretty vague, actually. Again, you read Article 3, establishes the court It says nothing about the power to strike down laws passed by Congress. This ambiguity was a compromise. Strong Federalists wanted a robust national judiciary, states' rights advocates. They feared a kind of all-powerful court that could override the will of the people, and so we compromise. The final document split the difference, right? It leaves the precise role of the judiciary to be worked out in practice rather than explicitly granting its supremacy over the elected branches of government. And this early American distrust of unelected judges, that's not abstract. That is actually rooted in lived experience, right? The colonists had rebelled against a system where the unwritten constitution, as they say over in Britain, that kind of politics gave no protection to Americans, right? And so they designed a new republic to ensure that the people, through their elected representatives, could ultimately retain control over the laws that govern them. So that whole judicial review, modern practice, all of that, where the Supreme Court can literally just like nullify legislation at will, that runs counter to the founding principles of American government. It gives like an unelected, just like, I don't even know, license to kill, the final veto over the government to these people. That is something that the founding fathers explicitly sought to avoid. But okay, we know that. Is there anything else we could draw from, perhaps, to inform our understanding of how citizenship was understood by everyone ever until 5 seconds ago? Yeah, we mentioned it earlier. Look at the Naturalization Act of 1790. That provides the clearest evidence of how the founders actually understood citizenship, passed by the very first Congress. And one of the first things they did, this was the first federal law dealing with immigration, dealing with naturalization, and it explicitly restricted citizenship to, quote, free white persons of good character who had resided in the United States for 2 years. George Washington himself signed the act into law. This was not an afterthought. This was not some minor procedural or clerical rule. I don't know. This was one of the earliest acts, actually, of the new republic. And, you know, it was meant to reflect the judgment of the men who had just written the Constitution, fought a war to establish that republic, all of that. So this language is actually kind of like, I don't know, impeaching, pretty devastating to the modern myth of like universal birthright heckin' citizenship. The founders did not view citizenship as an automatic right to be granted to somebody, the privilege to be granted to somebody by mere physical presence on American soil. They viewed it as a deliberate bond that required affirmative steps, good character, compatibility with the existing population, the existing culture, the existing religious views, like all of that. The idea that illegal aliens could just cross the border and give birth and instantly create new American citizens would have been completely alien to them or pretty much anyone else ever. They literally would have thought that you were joking or perhaps insane. They designed a system quite deliberately for controlled immigration, controlled naturalization, literally the most opposite thing it could possibly be from some kind of like open invitation for demographic transformation through, I don't even know, birth tourism, whatever you want to call it. And it also undermines the claim that the 14th Amendment somehow overturned everything that came before it, right? Like the 14th Amendment, for the billionth time, was a targeted response to the unique situation of a particular population after the Civil War. That was never intended to create some new system of automatic citizenship for the children of foreigners who have literally no connection to the United States, right? The amendment's own authors made clear in their debates, in their language, that that was addressing that specific issue in the aftermath of Dred Scott, not a blanket rule for every baby born in U.S. territory literally at any point. So by confronting birthright citizenship, which is what we're doing, hopefully successfully, Trump is simply restoring the founding fathers' vision for sovereign nations, the founding fathers' vision for a nation that can decide its own membership, actually, rather than just having it imposed upon it by geography, by judicial fiat, whatever you want to call it. And we also know that this is important because it is one of the biggest power sources for the left. So, of course, there's going to be a fight. The system wants to defend itself. But thankfully, Trump is a fighter. I mean, look at him. He's literally making history by attending the arguments for this particular case. Presidents don't do that. Donald Trump is doing that, and it's because he understands the stakes. He understands that the modern consequences of birthright citizenship are a direct threat to American sovereignty, to American national security even. Like the anchor baby phenomenon allows illegal aliens to cross the border, give birth instantly. Wow, we've got all these new citizens. They can then later sponsor the entire family to come over, chain migration. We know how this works, right? So this is a system that takes the 14th Amendment and makes it into like an immigration superhighway, floodgate, whatever. It rewards law breaking rather than punishing it. That's not how we do things in America. And arguably the most dangerous exploitation comes from China. Because like we said, Beijing actively encourages pregnant Chinese women to travel to the United States specifically to give birth. They call them, birth tourists, right? So they deliver their children in American hospitals. They obtain U.S. passports for the infants. Then they return to China. So the children grow up and they're dual citizens, right? They're raised with loyalty to China, to the Chinese Communist Party, and intelligence agencies have warned for years about this because it creates a pool of potential spies, saboteurs who hold American citizenship but can move freely within the United States. The DHS talks about it. You know, we've got data between 2020 and 2025 shows thousands of these things occurring annually, concentrated in states with lax enforcement and very high quality medical facilities, or so I'm told. This is strategic demographic infiltration. This is what I would do if I were them, but I'm not them, and so we have to stop it. So thank you, Donald Trump, for trying to stop this. End birthright citizenship, the ability of like these children of illegal aliens, children of temporary visitors, that is a direct attack on our sovereignty, on our Constitution, and this is just a necessary defense of the American people, because by restoring the original understanding that actually, citizenship requires lawful presence and a genuine allegiance, not just opportunism, that policy would close that kind of like anchor baby loophole. It would deter birth tourism. It would protect national security from foreign espionage. It would also send a very clear message that American citizenship is actually, a privilege earned through, at best, if you're lucky, if we're feeling generous, a legal process, not some geographic accident because it was so simple that even you in your inferior intelligence was able to figure out some kind of loophole for it. So, I don't like this. I don't like what the Supreme Court did. I don't like that whole 14th Amendment expansion creating these kinds of dangers. I know it was deliberate, but still, insofar as Trump can reform that and correct citizenship actually to being that deliberate controlled system that everybody intended until 5 seconds ago, that's going to be great. We need that now more than ever, perhaps, because we are in an age of mass migration and great power competition. So no responsible nation can afford to grant automatic citizenship to the children of those who enter its territory illegally or even for strategic purposes. We have to play a much tighter game here. So this is long overdue. We should have done this a billion years ago. No one else could have done it. I'm glad it's happening now. We know why it happened in the first place. We know it was a particular response to the freed slaves. We understand now the illegitimate expansion because of the Chinese thing. We understand that judicial review is in itself not exactly constitutional. It was just invented by the Supreme Court, now exploited by the left. We understand all of that. Great. Now we are here, dealing with the modern anchor baby problems, dealing with Chinese security threats, all of that. The system that's rewarding illegal entry, punishing American citizens, creating diversity in a very not enriching way, undermining the idea of American sovereignty, which the last 10 years have sought to restore. So thank you, Donald Trump, for fighting to end this distortion. Thank you, Donald Trump, for fighting to return citizenship policy to the deliberate controlled system that the founders intended. And this is bigger than one policy, too. You know, the fight's not going to end here. This is about generally reclaiming self-government from this unelected judiciary that has seized powers that the Constitution never gave to it, quite deliberately. The American people, us, not activist judges, should decide who becomes a citizen. So now is the time to restore constitutional order. We have the perfect opportunity. I can't believe that we're even here, to be honest with you. I will allow myself a moment of, wow, how far we've come. However, again, we've triggered the boss fight. Now we actually have to fight it. I'm glad we have the opportunity to fight it. I'm glad Donald Trump is literally walking himself in there with his chest out, Vince McMahon style, looking his justices in the eye like, don't mess up. Don't do it, Amy Coney Barrett. Never trust a woman with a hyphenated last name. I guess we'll see. So hopefully everything goes well. I think it will. I'm compelled by some of the arguments, but this is one of those things, as we articulated in the What Happens Now monologue after we won in 2024. If you can conceive of the possibility of victory, there are like 15 things that would have had to have occurred for that to, happen. This is one of those things. Birthright citizenship has to go. There is perhaps no greater tool for the left to maintain their power over patriots than this, and it's a very good sign that it is being contested at the highest level, and so hopefully everything goes well. But speaking of things going well, I do have to tell you, spring hits. We know this. It happens once a year. Life gets pretty hectic, right? When life gets hectic, that's when it is very important for you to have your underwear situation under control. That is why I wear Undertac, because bad underwear equals a bad day. It's literally just arithmetic. You're traveling more because it's spring. You're outside more because it's spring. You're on your feet longer. Can you guess why? If what you are wearing underneath is not dialed in, you'll notice, and you'll notice pretty quickly. And you'll notice it also when it ruins your entire day and you want to cry. Undertac was designed for and tested by real special forces guys operating in Africa. That's very scary, isn't it? Brutal environment, brutal population. not exactly the place where you want to be, maybe, I don't know, not so in control of like your underwear situation. A lot of problems over there. Anyway, they are there and they've got the underwear. It's breathable, it's antibacterial, it's insanely comfortable, it's built to perform when it is time to perform, and that is extremely important. They've also got a hidden escape and evasion pocket for things that you would need for hidden escape and evasion. Whatever, handcuff keys, cards, whatever you don't want to lose when you are moving around all day being a productive young patriot. So right now, you get 20% off site-wide. Use code Doyle20 at Undertac.com. It's not just underwear, by the way. They've got American-made socks, EDC tees, hoodies, joggers, even stuff for the 7%er in your life, stuff that actually holds up. It's a fantastic product. They are our cool friends. We've known about this for years. Go to Undertac.com. Use code Doyle20. That's Undertac, TAC.com, code Doyle20. It is spring. Upgrade your base layer now or deal with it for the rest of your life, literally. Speaking of making good choices, we will be talking about Pam Bondi in a second. BRB. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the program to discuss Pam Bondi. She's been fired. Rumors were swelling on social media, and then President Trump confirmed it. He announced that Pam Bondi was going to be removed as Attorney General yesterday, of course, on Truth Social, stating, Pam Bondi is a great American patriot and a loyal friend who faithfully served as my Attorney General over the past year. Pam did a tremendous job overseeing a massive crackdown in crime across our country, with murders plummeting to their lowest level since 1900. We love Pam, and she will be transitioning to a much-needed and important new job in the private sector to be announced at a date in the near future. And our Deputy Attorney General and a very talented and respected legal mind, Todd Blanche, will step in to serve as Acting Attorney General. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Bondi then responded publicly and said, over the next month, I will be working tirelessly to transition the office of the Attorney General to amazing Todd Blanche before moving to an important private sector role I'm thrilled about, and where I will continue fighting for President Trump and this administration. Leading President Trump's historic and highly successful efforts to make America safer and more secure has been the honor of a lifetime and easily the most consequential first year of the Department of Justice in American history. Since February 2025, we've secured the lowest murder rate in 125 years, secured first-ever terrorism convictions against members of Antifa, true, shattered domestic and transnational gangs across the country, taken custody of more than 90 key cartel figures, won 24 favorable rulings at the Supreme Court. I remain eternally grateful for the trust that President Trump placed in me to make America safe again. Okay, that's not a bad rap sheet, right? Not terrible, not a bad resume. There was some tabloid gossip, take that for whatever it's worth, reporting apparently that Bondi begged and pleaded to keep her job. This is unsubstantiated. I don't know. I think that maybe if you have a resume like that, the media would like to portray you as weak if you're like, collecting skulls or collecting scalps. The media also states that Trump was growing increasingly frustrated with Bondi over previous months regarding the handling of the Epstein files, the slow pace of prosecutions, particularly pertaining to his political opposition, and just general incompetence at the DOJ. So we can understand that. I mean, if Bondi was indeed the architect of the whole Epstein files thing, that was clearly the biggest misstep, I think, of this administration. Even, you've got the war going on with Iran. I would argue that the Epstein thing has actually been far more politically consequential, which is maybe going to be an insane take, but maybe that does diminish how big of a deal the military conflict is, but I don't know. That was pretty obviously a disaster. Put it this way. More people talked to me specifically about the Epstein thing than they did the war with Iran thing. So I don't know, take that for whatever it's worth. So Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is now serving as Acting Attorney General pending a permanent nomination by Trump and a Senate confirmation. Reports are suggesting, though, that you've got perhaps current EPA Administrator, former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin being eyed to be a permanent replacement. Other names being floated are Harmeet Dillon, Janine Pirro, Ron DeSantis, could be, or perhaps Blanche himself. Todd Blanche was Trump's personal defense attorney throughout the Brandon era. All those persecutions with New York hush money, the Jack Smith, all that stuff. Some are alleging that Blanche was the one holding up prosecution of Democrats and other Trump enemies, whether it's Antifa terrorism, etc. Some say he's a rhino. They say he's one of these principled conservative types that are occupying the second Trump administration, which is, of course, bad news. He's not tough enough, stuff like that. And a lot of people, too, hold him also accountable for the handling of the Epstein files, similar to Pam Bondi. So I can definitely understand that. I will say this, insofar as the public is looking at somebody like Pam Bondi, of course, the head, right, the Attorney General, they're looking at her as somebody ultimately responsible, as any leader of an institution would be, for insufficient or inadequate targeting of Antifa terror cells, insufficient or inadequate handling of the Epstein files, stuff like that. I mean, that is kind of like textbook warranting for a leadership change. It appears that it was a diplomatic break. I mean, again, you see the tabloid stuff where it's like, oh, she was begging and pleading for her job. Dude, like, what if she was? Like, who cares? She's a woman. She's the attorney general. She finds out she's not going to be the attorney general anymore. Like, I don't know. What I know is that publicly how they chose to handle this is certainly far better than some things that we've seen in recent weeks, I will say, when, you know, you are no longer going to be working for the Trump administration and you decide to make it into like a big thing and make yourself into a martyr and like fall on a sword that was like way out of your way. This is like literally just like lying to people for clout. We've seen that. We've seen plenty of that. So if she was let go, good on her for transitioning to the private sector. Good on her for handling things with grace and diplomacy and, I don't know, just basic, like, good basic human decency for political operations. I will say that if Trump is privately expressing, which I think is true, because you remember, Trump is always the one that wants to lock up his political opposition. Trump is the one who has been dealing with all of that, catching all of those arrows in his body, and then being told by people who are not under attack, well, Mr. President, you really shouldn't do that, Mr. President. So Trump is the lion who is always being held at bay by the political class. And he's shed a lot of that in recent years. I mean, look at Trump 1.0 versus Trump 2.0. That's objectively just true, even if Trump 2.0 is not yet like, you know, full lion mode. But it is to say, if he's looking at the fruits of Pam Bondi's DOJ, seeing the Epstein files, disaster, which I really do think has been the most disastrous thing to attach itself to his administration in terms of PR backlash, crisis of legitimacy, whatever. Look at the handling of that, because, you know, that seemed to be like, remember, she was the architect of that, the influencer meetup with the binders and everybody. Transparency, it was a whole thing. That seems to be like a Pam Bondi kind of like brainchild. So you had that. You also have the Antifa disaster, obviously. I mean, we have the arrest. That's awesome. I'm not complaining about that. Things are moving in the right direction. But still, if it's not good enough for the American public, it's not good enough for the president. He's like, why are my political opponents not in jail? Why are Antifa not in jail? You can say, well, Mr. President, you know, we tried to go after this person and this person and this person, and then the courts literally just said, no, we can't. That's true. Like, that did happen. It's not as though nothing was attempted. But it's also true that sometimes you just need a change of pace. Sometimes you just need some fresh leadership. So I support the Trump administration for doing that. Thank you, Pam Bondi, for your service. But let's see who can take it over from here. Hopefully they can do a better job, right? Because that's always the intention. You always want to be improving. You want somebody to get in there and do a better job. I would vote for a competent white male. I love our pretty faces. I love our bimbos. I understand, Mr. President, you've got a taste for that. But I think that we need to maybe show some love to husky white patriots, right? Show some love to literally just like normal white guys who, you know, maybe are of more particular attorney general stock, right? That's just kind of my opinion, but maybe I'm a little outdated in that attitude. But I do want to tell you actually about a cool new show from my cool friends, Stu and Dave. They're launching a new show. It's called Stu and Dave. What are they going to be doing? They're going to be doing America. It's actually awesome. Stu is going to be making sense of the world. Dave is going to be also making sense of the world. And then they're going to come together and point out how ridiculous it is. And then you're going to have something that's probably pretty close to the truth. So they are going to take the biggest stories of the day, run through them, through those different perspectives, and then they're going to give you something informative, entertaining. And usually that is not the case. Usually all this stuff like sucks and it's bad and it's just not good content. We want real conversation. So April 6th, it's coming up. It's right around the corner. If you are tired of content that is bad and you want content that is actually good, this is worth your time. So go check it out. Very exciting. We'll be right back with the Patriot Q&A. All right, ladies and gentlemen, back on the program for the Friday Patriot Q&A. User C. Kips, is it a Patriot power move to colonize leftist songs and bands like Green Day? Yeah, it is, dude. As long as like the bands you're colonizing aren't like themselves spiritually leftist. Green Day tries to do this, which is why I will always love Blink-182 more than Green Day. I used to be discouraged by that. I used to see like top 10 pop punk bands. Number 1, Green Day. Or no, number 1 would be Blink. And then number 2 would be Green Day. And this was when I was real into my like American Idiot Dookie phase. And so I was like, you idiot, I'm going to kill you with my hands. Like, how could you say that? Because I only knew Blink is like all the small things guys. I hadn't delved into the lore, to the discography. So it's a far superior band, frankly. Though I think Green Day probably I don't know. I think that I can't say this. It literally would pain me to say this. I will say that Mike Dirnt has some pretty good bass lines. I'll put it that way. But yeah, dude, because like the energy, you know, surrounding the music is fundamentally like transgressive. Like it's angry, it's anxious, it's high energy. And sometimes they may be directing that as something wholesome, like a nice lily white American suburb. And you've got this like idiot who's like, you know, I want to do Ritalin and be mad. It's like, okay, dude, like, I don't know. But I think that the fact that they go out of their way to try to say something, you know, maybe I'm the America, it's like, whoa, I'm not a part of your redneck agenda. And then now when they play that song, I'm not a part of your MAGA agenda. Dude, I am going to listen to that music and I'm going to get what I want out of it. And you can't do anything about it. Death of the artist. You made this whole rock opera about the freaking American propaganda. Grr, war is bad. Guess what? I am now spending hours a week doing pro-war apologetics, and I listen to your album at the gym. What now? What's your move? Billy Joe, you're going to become bisexual? You already played that card. You can't do it again. You're out. So, yeah, I would say do that. User Christini Zucchini says, opinion on Michael Jackson. Dude, I don't know. I like Michael Jackson because Trump liked Michael Jackson. I don't buy the whole he was about to, like, you know, wake up the elites about, or wake up the people about elites and all this other stuff, and that's why they killed him. Like, I think that case was pretty clear cut there, in my opinion. I haven't looked into it too much. I haven't watched the documentary about the pedophilia either. I really don't have an opinion on him other than I know his songs and I like his songs, but I guess I haven't really read too much into his personal conduct. I always thought that he literally switched races. Like, my mom grew up listening to the Jackson 5, and so we would listen to, you know, Michael Jackson songs occasionally in the car. And it was explained to me that he did not like that he was black, and so he literally switched races as a matter of, like, cosmetic surgery. I now understand that that is not exactly the case, and that he had, like, a skin condition, and then over time he just became whiter. Is that what happened, Producer Blake? Or yeah, but then I guess, like, the sort of modern telling is, like, he felt, like, guilt because he was abused, and then he became white. I don't know, but for a good, like, 13 years, I thought that this dude, like, literally switched races just as, like, I don't like being black, and then just became white, so I don't know. User Holland Jonah says, give me and my boys a white boy summer activity, and it will be done. Be careful. Be careful. I'll give you a white boy summer activity. It's not for the faint of heart. You know, I was going to update my checklist, actually, because I know I gave a checklist a few years ago, and I stand by that checklist. I think it's very good. But now, you know, we're 5 years into White Boy Summer. We got to keep it alive. We got to be fresh. So what should you and the boys do? We've done the climb things that shouldn't be climbed. We've done kiss a girl and never speak to her again. We've done start surprise wrestling matches and don't stop until someone gets unironically mad. That's a good one too, by the way, because, like, all of this is very fun in spirit, and this is literally explicitly like, hey, cross a line, make it real, like, get someone actually mad at you. Okay, here's what it is. You and one of your boys are going to schedule an appointment with a relationship counselor. Here's the plan. You're going to go in there and you're going to say, okay, we're both going to put money on the line. I don't know how much it costs to get a session with one of these relationship counselor people. Let's say it costs like $200 or something. Maybe you need insurance. I don't know. Here's the game. You both go halves on it. Whoever loses has to cover the cost of the entire session. Here's the game. Go in there and talk to some, like, 30-something girl. She's got, like, a master's in psychology or whatever. She's a relationship counselor. You and your boy are going to be in a gay relationship together. You are going to take turns expressing why you feel that your partner is not accurately displaying, you know, I don't know, the virtues of a gay relationship, whatever. Here's the game. You play ping pong back and forth. Anything you say that he is doing, he cannot deny. Anything he says that you are doing, you cannot deny. You can deflect, you know, if he says, like, I just don't like the way that he da-da-da, like something gay. You can just be like, why would you bring that up when you're the one that, like, start a fight? Make this person's day very uncomfortable. Whichever one of you laughs first or makes it obvious that you are just, like, fucking with this person for no other reason than you're bored, that person loses and then has to cover the entire cost of the session. So if you, like, mentally prepare, you go in there with ice in your veins, dude, stone cold, I bet I could last, like, an hour. Just objectively horrible behavior just putting in front of this person, like some relationship counselor, and just being like, yeah, it's so interesting how you say that when, like, you're the one who literally took my mom off life support to plug in your phone. Like, some just, like, horrible behavior. Like, you literally, like, purposefully put the wrong phone number on the flyers to find my lost cat because you didn't want to have a cat. And so then, like, we could never find it because, like, just horrible behavior, right? And that is just so beyond the scope of what the gay relationship counselor is, like, able to deal with, like, he doesn't talk to me enough. He keeps getting AIDS. Like, you're just coming in there just like, yo, he, like, killed my dog. He, like, killed my dog, and I'm still not over it. And then here's the other part of the game. Anytime the counselor, and ideally you would make this like a weekly thing. You should ideally be doing this every week. It's like doubling and tripling down. It's like, make the total cost be in the thousands of dollars to where, your buddy's going to have to pay all that or something, or maybe you get some other bonus. I don't know. You can make it your own. Here's another idea that I think would be funny. Anytime the relationship counselor even approaches territory suggesting, like, maybe we need to consider if this relationship is really working for everybody, you immediately become defensive. You immediately are like, who are you to say that? What are you talking about? You're here to work out our bad qualities. You don't know about all the good qualities. Like, just something like that. Do that with your girlfriend. Do that with a dude. Declare psychological warfare on the therapist class, dude. These people suck. I hate them. And I want you to go make their lives more stressful and perhaps more interesting at the same time. So it balances out. It's a public good. There is your assignment. If you don't accept it, you're actually gay. That's the rule. You need to, you're like breaking out. You're shedding skin. You are emerging. It is a metamorphosis. For you to truly achieve heterosexuality, you must dance with the devil. You must do a little tour of service, acting like a gay man with your boy. And only then can you truly achieve heterosexuality. If you do not follow this task, you asked me, what do I do for White Boy Summer? I put it in front of you. If you deny this now, you are permanently gay. You are permanently a homosexual. So this is why you don't make a wish to a genie. There's always a catch. There's always a catch. There's your mission. If you don't accept it, you are gay. User Andrew24, you watch Invincible? No, but I'm like 90% sure that producer Blake has been telling me to watch that for like 15 years. User Space Cowboy, Batman or Spider-Man? It is obviously Spider-Man. We broke this down one night. Literally, like, if you look at the Chris Nolan Batman trilogy versus the Spider-Man trilogy, and by the way, I mean, like, literally the only Spider-Man movie, Sam Raimi. If you break it down, dude, in terms of cinematography, writing, anything, like, Spider-Man objectively wins. Everybody's like, oh, but it's Christopher Nolan. Yeah, and he fucked that up. How embarrassing for him, right? What shots do you remember from Chris Nolan's Batman trilogy right now? Just in terms of cinematography, maybe you like Batman better than Spider-Man in terms of comics. Fine, take that. You can be wrong. That's fine. What shots do you remember? Heath Ledger being cool? Gary Oldman being cool? Those are actors doing their actor thing. I'm talking about actual shots. You know what immediately comes to mind for me? Spider-Man trilogy? The upside down kiss, literally iconic. What about Spider-Man 2? Remember that shot? I don't even have to tell you. You already know. When Spider-Man's swinging to confront Doc Ock at the clock tower, and we zoom out and it reflects out of his sunglass lens. Literally unbelievable. Cinematography, dub. Soundtrack, Hans Zimmer did a decent job, dude. Danny Elfman, however, the Spider-Man 3 soundtrack, I get chills. I get chills when I hear that versus Hans Zimmer. He's like, oh, I'm Hans Zimmer. What if the music was like, and then what if it went, yeah, dude, what if? What if that happened? Who fucking cares? It's like, it doesn't do it for me. I don't know. So cinematography, dub for Raimi. Score, I would say dub for Raimi. Even writing, dude. The dialogue, I mean, Chris Nolan has a very particular kind of way he directs. Always very like fast-paced dialogue. I don't know. Character development, too. What is even the character development? Rachel be like, I'm Rachel, now I'm dead. Okay, wow, fantastic arc, I guess. And then I got ugly before I died. Like, what is even happening? We had like 15 different ways to break it down, and we ended up putting the majority of the points in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man column, actually. Probably even better villains, frankly. I mean, think about how iconic Dr. Octavius is. The Sandman. Even the Green Goblin. I mean, Batman, the Joker, obviously. Everybody knows the Joker. Dude, I didn't know who Bane was. Like, sorry. I was into Batman as much as the next guy. Believe it or not, I didn't know about this Bane character. I knew every Spider-Man villain. I don't know who Bane is. Scarecrow, like, okay, like, I guess. Catwoman? Who needs Catwoman when you have Black Cat? Things to consider. Anyway, I could go on. User Mr. Caleb. Any advice for a new Catholic confirmed this Easter? What keeps you in check with God? That's a good question. I do an examination of conscience at the end of the day. So I do an examination of conscience on my during my nighttime prayer routine. So I think about everything I did that I should not have done. I meditate on that. I thank God for giving me the ability to perceive my own inadequacies. Then later, like literally like 5 seconds later, I begin doing an examination, I guess you'd say, of gratitude. I think of everything good that happened to me that day, and I thank God for that. It really puts everything into perspective, right? So I do that. That's very helpful. Some days I spend less time listing things that I did that were bad, which was a good day. And then other days I spend less time thinking about things that happened to me that were good. And then maybe that was like not so good of a day. But generally you kind of get an idea of your own patterns of behavior. You know, it's really easy to just be like, I'm a sinner. I'm not perfect. I'm just as God made me. Okay. Why don't you do a little self-inventory? Figure out exactly what you find yourself saying every day is a problem. Every day I do this. I swear at people in traffic. I am impatient. I'm whatever. And you start to kind of get an idea of where your flaws actually are and what you could be doing better. So I think that's very helpful. Obviously, being at Mass every Sunday, going to a confession, doing everything that you like know you're supposed to be doing is generally going to be helpful. But I think keeping that kind of humility about yourself is extremely, extremely important. And that's really the reason why I spend very little time actually talking about my faith on the internet, because I view all of that to really be an exercise in vanity. The way that like Christian or even Catholic content exists on the internet, I think is very not good. But I'm not looking to get involved in a spat. I'm not looking to counter signal people trying to do the right thing, ostensibly, perhaps not actually. I don't know. But if you ask me, I'll talk about it. But I find all of that to be very, 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 very problematic, frankly. So, user MPR Robertson says, thoughts on raw milk? I'm pro. I can't say I go out of my way to get raw milk. I get, 100% grass-fed, organic whole milk from local farmers, but can't say I'm going all the way there. But no, I'm pro. User Wiley, 2003. Who would be a better AG? Conservative female law student or a male D1 lacrosse player? Don't make me laugh. Obviously, the D1 lacrosse player. Ideally, he would be a Duke alumnus, right? Okay, anyway, we are going to get out of here and we are going to enjoy our Good Friday. We're going to do a little bit of fasting, do a little bit of meditating. I recommend you do the same. Perhaps even watch The Passion. Very good movie. Mel Gibson, Patriot. Actually, he is now producing The Resurrection, the sequel to The Passion, which is, I think, one of the highest grossing films ever. Wonderful, wonderful film. So I would recommend watching that, spending time with your family, making sure you're in good standing for church on Sunday. And until then, we will see you back on Monday. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Be sure to go to Apple, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a review with your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Happy Easter. He is risen, which I will repeat on Monday because he will be risen. And thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Bye-bye.